At what had to be a disappointing press conference for many DA voters or sympathizers, or for that matter, any cogent, lucid South Africans, the Democratic Alliance leadership team gave a press conference where they strayed from the most important subject to focus on how they plan to contest the 2026 municipal elections. For those of us who watched the press conference, it was like watching a train wreck in progress where the passengers are oblivious to the fate that awaits them.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that since I'm in town in Boulders, folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa.
The Democratic Alliance are becoming masters of not correctly reading the room. While most South Africans paying any attention to the Democratic Alliance want to know its plans for combating expropriation without compensation, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, the 3% black tax, and national health insurance, they are focused on their 2026 municipal elections. What? In spite of being a bit under the weather, Party leader John Steenhuisen did his best to put on a brave spin. Steenhuisen went to great lengths, despite his cold and his sore throat, to tell us that they entered the government of national unity because the ANC lacked the votes. A coalition was necessary. And that in his view, South Africa could not survive the doomsday coalition of MK, EFF with the ANC. But that's a bit disingenuous. The ANC was never going to ally with MK and or EFF. It simply wasn't going to happen for various reasons. The two largest parties needed consensus. That's what he argued. And he said repeatedly, at least 3 times during his initial comments, that Democratic Alliance is committed to the coalition surviving because they're focused on jobs and growth. Except where are those jobs? Where are those jobs? He did give us a bit of news saying that Ramaphosa had agreed to a meeting with him that evening. And as I said, he said, we're committed to remaining GNU 3 times. They see it as a vehicle for growth. Wow. Don't know what they're talking about. And once again, we're squarely behind the GNU. Well, I'm sure you are. Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC have now implemented, enacted almost all of the National Democratic Revolution. So it's great that you're in bed with the ANC, but that's what they want. The only thing that even sounded like he was serious about what's going on is he did make a brief statement saying that if the Democratic Alliance is not including policy going forward, it makes it difficult to continue. But there was no threat to leave the GNU. No, in fact, quite the opposite. They're committed to it. So they've already put their cards on the table. They've told the ANC that, we're not going to leave no matter what you do. And that really leaves the ANC in the driver's seat. He did say we will not be taken for granted, not reduced to the role of spectator. But that's exactly what you are, John. That's what the DA is, a spectator in the ANC's theater of kabuki communism. Yvonne Meyer got up and spoke, and he talked about the federal council meeting in Joburg, and this is where the shift came to what the conference was actually about. He said they met over planning for municipal elections for 2026 with 4 objectives. They want to retain the current municipalities under the DA control. They want to grow the DA footprint. They hope to govern more towns, and they want to rescue more towns. And this is a theme that became recurrent here, is rescuing towns. And he started the same nonsense that the Democratic Alliance tried in the last municipal elections, which failed miserably and really irritated a lot of voters. Several times he said, don't vote for smaller parties. Well, South Africa, vote for whomever you want. Don't listen to the DA. They need to make a better argument than telling you not to vote for smaller parties. Explain why your party matters more. There's a reason people don't all just glom onto their standard, and this is one of the reasons. He made a big point of talking about how all the municipalities in the Free State Northwest are already collapsed. Well, we know this. We've known this for a long time. But the reality is anyone that can afford to no longer counts on the government for service delivery. If they can escape government, they do it. Now's when their campaign for 2026 begins. The blue machine is at its strongest, is what they said. That was almost hilarious to listen to. He said, we have a rescue mission for your town. Really? And I think you're going to have to tailor that to each town. And once again, he repeated, do not vote for smaller parties. The DA is preparing to rescue your town. Well, I don't need the DA to rescue me. I don't need the Republicans to rescue me. I don't need the Democrats to rescue me. I am responsible for my own agency, as most South Africans should be. Next came the federal chair, Helen Zille, and she brought up the blue machine again and talked about the process on how they're getting candidates. They're revising their selection process. But what struck me about all 3 of these speakers is that despite her gravitas and her experience and longevity in politics and, her previous role as a journalist, Helen Zille, all these folks look like complete amateurs, rubes. Also, they're a bit condescending, pompous, and clueless in their comments directed to the public. And when Helen was speaking, if you watch the video, John Steenhuisen looks like he was being held hostage. Now, to be fair, he's a bit under the weather. Maybe that had something to do with it. The question she asked was, how do we find the best people up to this challenge? They have a Catalyst program in which they've identified 77 candidates. You have until February 1st to submit your curriculum vitae if you'd like to be one of those people in their program to become a member of government under the DA. And March 1st if you want to be a candidate for mayor. But one thing became pretty apparent in this. There seemed to be a focus almost exclusively on fixing towns in Gauteng, not the whole country. And I got the feeling over and over again that these people are just jellyfish, lacking a spine. There was no talk about the real issues affecting South Africans: security, EWC, Bella, black tax, NHI, barely touched on. Not a single mention of South Africa refineries, only one of them in operation, and at one time there were none in operation. And the debacle with ArcelorMittal, which has been done in by the collapsed infrastructure and the unions and ANC's macroeconomic policies. At the beginning, John Steenhuisen did express his condolences on behalf of the party for the 9 service members killed in Congo as part of the South African National Defense Force. That number went up by another 4 today, so it's 13 have now died. The Democratic Alliance, ladies and gentlemen, seems to be high on hubris. They are high on hubris. John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille made the point, we brought 3.5 million votes, ignoring the loss of 500,000 voters between 2 national elections. The DA appeared to be very offended that they were ignored by Cyril Ramaphosa and the African National Congress as part of the GNU. But all the while, they're ignoring the plight of South Africans who are clearly annoyed with this joke press conference. And they're doing exactly what Steenhuisen said the ANC is doing to them, giving a tin ear to the views, opinions of the DA, kind of like the way you treat the views and opinions of South Africans right now, right? So a question was asked by the journalist about DA governance in Johannesburg and Tshwane, saying the DA has been in charge for much of the time, and how is it the ANC's fault? Because it occurred on the DA's watch, the lack of service delivery. Well, in the case of Johannesburg, that's a factually incorrect statement. The DA has not been in charge much of the time, just briefly. Most of the time, it's not been the DA. In Tshwane, the case is, in fact, the DA has been largely in charge of that municipality for the past decade. The ANC has been out of power since 2016, and the city has not improved. It's gone the opposite direction. Helen Zille blamed that on ANC graft, corruption, and cater deployment for messing up service delivery. She claimed that we're the only party with the skills, the capacity, and the history to fix metros. Well, I think that's debatable. And this sentence came out. We are there by the grace and favor of the voters. Well, not really. Barely anybody voted in this election, and barely anybody voted for your party. So you're not there by the grace and favor. You're there by good fortune. Had people actually showed up, or if MK didn't exist, the ANC might very well have done better. Farrell Hoffagy from the Daily Maverick asked the question, will the GNU survive the year? Steenhuisen said, yes, it will. So this press conference was not about the things that matter to South Africans right now, particularly expropriation without compensation, which is unconstitutional. There's no question about that. This was not about that. This was about the road to local government. And as I said, Steenhuisen was scheduled to meet with Ramaphosa in the evening of the 28th of January, 2025. When we find out if that meeting occurred and what the outcome will be, I'll update you. But don't expect much. Things are going fine. The National Democratic Revolution is advancing just the way we planned on. I doubt that's how it'll go, but that's how it's going to appear to many South Africans. What say you, South Africa? This was a disappointment.